All right, thank you very much, Harpreet, for the intro. Um, I'm super glad to be able to be here with you guys from Sydney down under, as Harpreet just mentioned. It's 6:30 a.m. here in Sydney. So, and Sunday morning, super sunny and very nice. And that shows how devoted someone can be to AI ethics to do such a thing. And it's a pleasure to be here. All right, so I'll share my screen and go into it. So, right. All right, perfect. Thank you very much. And here we go. So these days you hear about AI everywhere, and it's pretty much a trendy topic. And I know that you guys that are here to watch this talk are probably very interested into this particular topic. So how can we make sure that we build AI ethically? Because it's not only about the applications and accuracy and all those interesting technical words that we always hear about. Um, it's also about fairness, robustness, and explainability. I'll go through this with you a little bit, but let's talk a little bit about AI itself. Um, AI is a very old thing. We have heard about it from like maybe 50 years ago or 40 years ago. That with the start of intelligent systems, and intelligence was a broad kind of topic. It's like it could be anything that is pre-programmed by humans that does the job a little bit better maybe than us, or in a similar way, maybe higher quality or maybe higher speed. But whatever we are talking about right now as an AI, it's just the a narrow AI, which is more of like a machine learning algorithms that just delivers some sort of small specific task, and it can be recognizing images like cats or dogs, or it can be, I guess, recommending some interesting movie to you when you're browsing Netflix. But anyway, it is a very narrow domain, artificial intelligence. And I know you have heard about the AGI, which is the general intelligence, artificial general intelligence. It's a super crazy, um, powerful, I guess, machine that can do the job better than us. There is no notion of that kind of AI right now that we understand and we can, I guess, work towards. Right now, whatever we have has a lot of, I guess, has a lot of limitations, and that's something that we all need to understand, that from here to there is going to be some sort of magic leap somewhere. We are going to probably come up with some sort of new technology that will be enabling us to get to AGI, if that's going to happen. And for now, whatever it is, we need to make sure that even the normal, very limited AI algorithms also work very ethically. If you haven't noticed, and probably you did, but we're using AI like literally every day in many different ways and cases that you probably haven't even thought about it. Like if you're using your normal apps like TikTok or your Facebook, LinkedIn, they're all using AIs to recommend you your friends, recommend you content, or if you're using Netflix, the same recommendation engines, Alexa helping you with the voice, and you can talk with Alexa using a lot of complex algorithms that we can call them AI, and that's what it is. Like the reason that we think it's important to talk about ethics and ethical AI is just because we are using it everywhere, and we are, I guess, getting the impact anyway on a daily life. And our information is being shared, and there are lots of collected data. So that makes it super important for us to make sure that the guidelines are right, and it is being used in the, I guess, good way, as we say in general. Yeah, and there are lots of other examples that I can just tell you how it is touching our industries. It is revolutionizing and kind of disrupting many industries that as we were talking about, companies that are not leveraging AI or they haven't decided to use AI, they probably will be disrupted very soon if they are not already disrupted. And as you can see in healthcare and customer care, it is already making impact. In some industries, maybe it is still not as powerful being used, and that's fine. Maybe there's not enough data available, or maybe it is still not generating enough accurate results. But that's the way it goes. It's just you need to start it, you need to understand it, and measure the impact until it gives you some sort of accuracy that is relevant to your business, and that's totally normal. But we also need to understand that AI is not something that you need to inject it into your business. The business itself will tell you if it is the right thing to use. So that's another topic. That's another whole topic to talk about, like what kind of businesses and how to leverage AI. But for now, we just make sure that we talk about those that are already using it, or they're planning to implement AI to bring some sort of value to their customers. The major kind of AI that I'm going to talk about and focus is the deep learning, which is a kind of machine learning algorithm that became popular kind of recently. And the reason that it became popular recently is just because we collected enough data, digital footprints and other data, to be able to train this beast, because it's just so hungry for data to generate something meaningful and useful. And also, because of the complexity of the algorithm and the data, you need a lot of computing power to make it work. So what happens here, it's like if you look at these image, you can see that from one side, you need to feed in a lot of information, a lot of images, and it will go through these layers of neurons. It will understand specific things, like, for example, for the image, it will identify the edges and combination of the edges, and it will kind of aggregate the understandings through the end of the, the layer of neurons. It will predict some specific results. In this case, it's going to predict that who is this person, and it's based on a lot of features and characteristics of that person and previous photos that we used to train this neural network. Those little circles are the neurons, and they're interconnected to each other, and you can see a lot of them are connected. And this is just a photo of a sample, and the real neural networks that we're using in industry right now is much more complex than this. And this is just a super simple view, and that makes it difficult to understand what's happening inside. It's very difficult to read all those numbers and connections, and how exactly this huge machine is coming up with these results, and that's part of the complexity. There are other machine learning algorithms that just are part of kind of the general kind of AI, which we can mention the decision trees or random forest. They're a little bit easier to understand and actually decipher. But this one particularly that I'm going to focus, and I think deep learning is probably 80-90% is responsible for 80-90% of the AI in the world. This slide is borrowed from Lex Friedman's slide from MIT course, and you can see here that we have started the whole thing, the whole neural network journey, like around 70, 80 years ago, when human, I guess, started to work with perceptrons, and the first idea of coming up with something similar to the notion of brain, the way we thought the brain is working. Right now we know that it's not similar to the I guess deep learning algorithms, but anyway, we started thinking like it's similar way that brain understands these information, and that was probably one of the reasons that it was called neural networks. And the major updates that we have seen recently was the ImageNet and AlexNet that just made it possible for people to understand the impact and started actually looking at machine deep learning in a different way, as an enabler, as an important, I guess, system. And it's more of leveraging the what is available to us, and having more information, having more data leveraged by these algorithms. Because we, as we have seen, we don't come up with a lot of algorithms and new technologies in AI every now and then. It's just there has been a couple of, I guess, innovations, but it's not majorly different from what we started as with the convolutional neural network and RNN and LSTM and all those stuff that just has been around for almost forever. So why when we are using AI, and why we think it's going to take over? If you just think about what we can do, we are good with complex stuff. We can just put many complex, I guess, thought processes together to come up with some sort of intuition or some creativity, which we don't know exactly how that sparkles. These are some of the interesting stuff about human, where we, invent things. We come up with new things. But then if you think about it, AI is a little bit different in this case. AI is very good with handling a large amount of data, huge amount of data. It can go through billions of records and can understand pretty much all of them in a very quick fashion. But it cannot do the same job that we are doing right now. It can't be creative because it's leveraging the same kind of information. But also it has its own benefits. As you can see, one of the examples here in they just trained AI to understand the understand the breast cancer, and the error rate was very low, a lot lower than human being. And that's great, because then you can apply that and make a lot of better decisions. It will help us to identify these with faster and more accurate. but also there are like a lot of limitation. And as I said, natural language generation has its own limitations, and you will see that if you're using AI to generate text following another paragraph, it might not be very coherent and cohesive, and it might not have a great kind of a grammar, and there might be lots of error, and that's totally normal with GPT-3. We have I guess went forward super fast in that kind of natural language generation and understanding, but still that needs a lot of data and computation power, and it's not 100% accurate. I mean, no algorithm will be 100% accurate, but it's not close even to something to be leveraged in industry. But also, I'm going to talk about the ethical limitations, like bias, like fairness, that just we need to make sure that AI will be fair to everyone. And that's the reason is because when AI replaces human decision making in many different places, we want to make sure it brings similar opportunities to everyone, no matter what is your gender, race, and background, cultural background. And the bias is fine as long as that's a normal technical bias. If, like, for example, you're going to apply for a loan, and that's the bias is about the credit score, and it's not because of your cultural background, then that should be fine. And the other, I guess, limitations that we need to talk about is being a black box. As I said, some of these neural network algorithms can be super complex, and understanding how exactly they're coming up with these classification and the result, it's actually not super easy for us to do. And we can come up with some sort of correlation and some kind of notion of what's happening, but it's not causation, definitely. And sometimes we cannot trace it back to all the features. And also robustness, because we need to make sure the accuracy and ensure that AI will deliver the same quality all the time. Adversarial attacks are very important these days. It's just, if you think about it, the traffic sign is very important for these autonomous cars. Like, if they don't understand these traffic lights and traffic signs, we're gonna have problems, And imagine if you can just tweak these traffic sign a little bit, which is not going to be, I guess, understood by a human, and it will fool the algorithm, and the algorithm will totally neglect the stop sign and think that's a football or a basketball, and that's not a real traffic sign. It will just go over some people walking in the street, and that can easily happen by tempering these signs or fooling the algorithm, which is very, very dangerous. So we need to also understand and make sure that if AI is going to be used in a places that are going to impact people's life, then we have some sort of mechanism to make sure it will not go off the road. And these are the things that we need to all be conscious that is AI fair in the decisions? Is it understanding our intentions? Because also it needs to align to our values. It needs to follow the same principles that we are following, right? It's just human rights and all those regulations that are written, or some of them are non-written, but still as a human we can understand and follow it very, very easily. And security, we need to, so that's about the AI itself. But there are other things that we need to be conscious of. Those who produce the AI, they're the people that are handling the data. They're going to label the data, and AI itself is understanding the data and what we tell AI. So AI doesn't have its own mind, if you know what I mean. So that's that's where AI will get the bias from, or will become, I guess, a little bit in a discriminative way. Not generating the same kind of similar opportunity for similar people, and that's coming from us as a human, because we do have bias. We do have bias about everything, and then I'll talk about that as well. But that's something that we need to be conscious of: the transparency of the design, how these AI is being modeled and being, I guess, used in the production environment. For the technical people, it's probably going to be a little bit painful. They need to make sure that all the documentation are right, and all these, I guess, tests are happening in the right way, and probably that's going to be a lot of too much effort. Um, I know that industries are kind of more towards putting AI into production as soon as possible and get it to the customer, and that's right, and that's great. But then we need to make sure that we do it in the right way, as the programmers do as well, right? And it's kind of like a programming thing. You need to make sure that it goes through the CI/CD and runs all the tests. And maybe for 2 lines of code that you write, you need to write 20 lines of codes of test. And it's a reality of our software engineering. The AI is going to be the same. And then also, we need to understand the government policies and policymakers, because they are the people that are going to ensure the fair use of AI, the legal use of AI. And sometimes they might actually be tempted to leverage it in a non-ethical way. Our personal data are being captured by the cameras and all those different devices and applications that we are using. I'm talking to this microphone. It is going to be captured somewhere. Lots of information and footprints are being generated, especially during the COVID, that we're working from home and we need to use all these electronic devices to connect and do our work. We even generate more footprints. I started watching more Netflix. That's going to help the recommender system, and good for Netflix to get to know me more. And the kind of similar thing, like buying more from maybe Amazon, just because it's more convenient, less human interaction. And that's why we need to also make sure the privacy is there. Accountability is another awesome topic to talk about. I know the easiest one is probably, if you think about autonomous cars, if it hits someone, or who is accountable for it, and is it the manufacturer? Is it the passenger? Is it the person who was hit by the car? I don't know. Like, this is the conversation that we need to have right now as we are going through these changes. AI, as powerful as it is, it can be used, weaponized, and it can be used as a I guess, part of the future arm race if it hasn't started yet. And also, the automation is going to take a lot of jobs, and we need to make sure that people will upskill and reskill to get ready for this era. This is the photo that has been, I guess, tempered by AI. So they look all identical to us. It's pretty much similar to each other, but AI, a normal, I guess, a machine learning algorithm, will probably get fooled, because there has been some tempers that changes the view for the machine learning algorithm. And that's one of the problems, because as a human, we will not be able to understand and mitigate the risk. Ethics are, so what is ethics itself? They're kind of well-founded standards of human rights and humanity, that just we understand what is right and what is wrong. And that's what a lot of different cultures might have a different understanding of ethics. It will evolve during the time, but it's still something that we should be all conscious, and we should be injecting it into our AI and AI engineering and building process. You will see the kind of the whole process, but the major thing that AI will sit is the governance that will look after how the data has been captured, generated, labeled, trained, all those different steps, and finally how it is being used to impact customer. It has a great potential, as I talked about it. It's something that might become very, very smart, that even might take over. We don't see that happening right now, but anyway, we need to be conscious about the impact. It's going to impact our life, our health, reputation, and in these sensitive cases, it is very important for us to make sure that we are protecting ourselves by having set of rules and guidelines. And so why ethical principles are, why ethical principles are important? So ethical principles improve the consistency of the team, that it has make sure that it has a diverse set of ethics coming into a project, and it makes sure that we share a set of technical ethics and principles that it can help us to harmonize our cultural variation. People are coming from different background, and these ethical principles also help us achieve number of aspects into building on existing ethics that organization has. But really, it's specifying. But really, it is something that provides more exceptions and permissions to questions, the breadth of implications. And the major thing that we need to think about, who are the technical ethics for? Who is needed to think about these ethical? And the real answer is like literally everyone, who is part of this whole ecosystem, AI ecosystem, from the person who collects the data, from the data scientists, creators, managers, and the experts that are creating the UX and designs. They are all part of these framework. They all need to understand it and make sure that they consider the final user. And it's just not about the algorithm, right? It's about everything. It's about even how we think about it, and how we maintain the algorithm, how we run the algorithm, and how we impact people. So what should we do to make sure that it is not biased, or the risk is kind of mitigated? We need to make sure that we have the right amount of testing and frameworks in place. And what if something goes wrong? What should we do? What can we do to mitigate the risk? And let's say if you're using autonomous car and things go wrong with the algorithm itself, is there any way that people can handle it directly so it doesn't go rogue? Or how we can switch it off? That should be a major concern, that people will be able to manually override if it is impacting people's life. And that's very important. But also understanding human is also a major part of the ethics. As I just mentioned, we are full of bias. I mean, like, bias is kind of genetically inherited by human, because it will make sure we survive in a very complex environment. And but the good news is, humans are more conscious of their own bias, and they can understand that what can go wrong and where it can go wrong. So if you see someone, and in the when you're walking in the street in the middle of the night, somebody just walking towards you, you might be more cautious, you might run, I don't know, you might think differently when the similar exact kind of incident happens during the day in a broad daylight and a lot of other people around you. So that's just like, we can understand the context, we can change our biases against people based on different situation. There are lots of different biases, and I guess there has been some studies like what kind of biases they are, and it is like literally a vast topic to think about. And what right now we're thinking about is the AI principles that would make sure that these biases are identified, and we understand which one of them are the right kind of bias and which one of them are the wrong bias, because we would like to make sure that the right bias is there. For example, if you're using a computer system to identify some, I don't know, health issues, you want to make sure that it understands the gender, right? It's just not all the different disease will apply to all the same gender, or not every implications would be the same. Like imagine probably the hormones will change for different genders, and probably male might have a little bit more testosterone, and that should be fine. And the same if happens for female, that's probably not fine. And that's this kind of bias. It is a gender bias, but it's defined in the context. So that's very important. We understand that what is a good bias, what is not a good bias, and the transparency of these understandings, and what are the values that we would like to inject into this algorithm, like the human rights, the values, the fairness, transparency. These are all the major things that we need to understand. Our biases are coming from our social class, resources that are available to us, and our education, race, gender. All these things will change our biases as a human, and it just makes it very important for us to make sure that the diversity of the people that are manipulating and generating the AI algorithm itself is there, just to ensure that there are different lenses into the problems, and there are different kind of thought processes around it. As I just mentioned, it's fine to have a bias, but there's like good bias and bad bias that we need to all understand. And there are lots of different ways that this bias can enter the algorithm itself. The major one comes from the data itself, and then when we are building the algorithm, we might even impact the algorithm, the way that we're analyzing the data, and also finally when we're using the algorithm in the in the application, that will also change the way that it is going to impact. If you think about it, for example, the facial recognition is one of the major things that right now, major topics that are very sensitive about race and gender bias. It's just because it is too obvious that what kind of racial background or what kind of gender that person has, and it's not too easy to take it out of the data set, versus that sometimes when you're filling some applications, you might drop that particular field, and it's easier to manipulate the data that make sure that this it doesn't go into the algorithm itself. When you're picking the team, it's always great to have diversity. It doesn't it's not about only AI and making a data science kind of algorithms and projects. It's about any project. But here it's even more important because of the impact. So that's why we're just going into too much of details and ethical frameworks and all those stuff. If you think about it, about the weapons, a knife can be a weapon as well, but because of the impact and implications, there are less rules around a knife than about, for example, a grenade, right? So that's a comparison between why we are going into too much of, thinking and discussions about AI, just because it's a tool that has a huge impact and huge potential, even we're not discovering and we are not using at this point. And that's that this diverse team, I guess, will help in different ways. They make sure that they become more aware of the potential biases. They help each other to understand that, and that's just help the whole decision-making process. All right, so now I would like to jump into the ethical principles that we are all talking about and what we should make sure that it's there. The responsible AI, equitable, traceable, reliable, and governable. That's all together will make something that we call trustable AI. It's like a responsible AI, and then we can rely on. Still, it always needs monitoring and governance and being traceable. But then if we make sure that we make these steps right, we can probably be happier that the end goal is going to be there. Different organizations are working to generate the foundation, the practices, best practices, and this is particular one of them. Still, it is not fully, I guess, fleshed out. There are lots of different fact sheets and documents that we need to leverage to deliver a good responsible AI. These fact sheets are kind of asking questions that we will be conscious of what is happening. And these are definitely not going to make AI to be responsible AI. As a human, we need to be conscious of a lot more complexities. And that will change based on the service, application, the domain, the user, and all those different things that we all know about it. But we can just go through these fact sheets and get some sense of where to look and how to start, and what are the things that we need to discuss. These are discussion points. Carnegie Mellon University also generated another one, which is an awesome checklist. There are probably around 20 of them from different organizations already out there. I would say it's the best to go through all of them to understand the differences and understand which one would be most suitable for your project. But they're pretty much very basic, and they're probably going to be 80-90% similar. As I mentioned, we all need to have we all, as a human, it is very easy to neglect some of the aspects of AI because it is just too complex for us to understand. But these just will give us some guidelines that we can go through, and we always need to monitor the result if it is impacting our life. And finally, it's about communication and mitigation plans. Things can go wrong. Whatever we do, AI is not going to be 100% accurate. There's going to be some inaccuracy, and we need to understand, all right, so what can go wrong and how we can mitigate these risks. Um, I think we are getting so close to the end of this discussion. I kind of think that I kind of went through the major part of it. There are a lot more to talk about having the ethics in the AI engineering, but I will just finish my note with the project that I am working right now with the United Nations. We are going to help generate some solutions for the problems that we are facing as a human in the world. And I will ask you guys if you would join us this hackathon to tackle the global goals challenges in the world. Thank you very much.
Steve, my friend, thank you so much. That was such a insightful presentation. I really, really appreciated that. Guys, if you have questions for Steve, go ahead and drop those right there into the chat so we can bring them up. Also, before we get into Steve's question, here's what I want you guys to do right now. I want you guys to take a screenshot of this right here of me and Steve, right? I want you guys to post this on LinkedIn, post it on Instagram, Twitter, wherever. Tag me, tag Steve. Use the hashtag DSGoVirtual. You're going to get a chance to win some amazing prizes. So, Steve, like, when we're thinking about ethics and building our model and, trying to mitigate the risk of including our own cognitive and personal biases into these models, like, what are some of the things that you think about as you're working with the data set to make sure that what you are doing is not going to harm anyone?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, there are things that are simply more obvious, and there are things that are more complex. The one that are obvious are the biases that we already know about the gender, about the race, about the cultural background. And I guess what we can do, we need to make sure by rigorous testing, understand how AI will deal with these differences, and is there anything in the system that will kind of make some sort of unfair advantage or unfair decisions towards any of these groups of people. That's, I guess, very, very very normal and very normal test that we need to go through. When we're collecting the data, at the point of collecting the data, knowing that what kind of data is private to the person and shouldn't be even collected and shouldn't be stored or being used for decision making, that's also one of the major things that we need to deal with, because it's the source of all the biases, the data itself. And also all the ethical frameworks are talking about the privacy, which just makes it very complex for technical people like us that are dealing with these applications daily to not only think about the accuracy, about the impact on the actual the function or the deliverable. You need to think about all the implications that are not very obvious or might not be very valuable to the business itself.
So I know there's a lot of aspiring data scientists, people who are breaking into the field, listening on this conversation, and many times when we're out there building our models out, playing around with data, we're always just concerned, like you mentioned, about the accuracy and getting an accurate model. How can we train ourselves to start thinking about the ethics involved in what we're doing? Do you have any recommendations in terms of books or in terms of just thought processes that you think we should start adopting?
Yeah, no, the good news is that as a human being, we all are concerned about ethics and ethical frameworks in general. We just sometimes will forget that it applies to the AI as an software itself. So we all know that if you're dealing with a customer as a human, we need to go beyond the certain characteristics, and just follow certain rules. And that might be that might get forgotten when we're dealing with AI. It's just these kind of I guess information sessions and reading articles, more articles will help us to get more sense of how this impacts people's lives. And it's not only the robustness and the accuracy that helps to make it a better application. There are other aspects that we need to be conscious of. It's, I guess, at the end of the day, it's about understanding the importance of AI and the impact of AI. If we all agree that AI is not another, I don't know, software or another technology that is going to be naturally used, and people will figure out how to, leverage it, then that's a good starting point. A lot of people still don't understand it. And that's just normal. It's just fine. But if you see how things can change drastically, like there was an article recently I was reading. It's like having more AI would actually help with it more, I guess, gap between the different social economical background. People with lower income might be under some sort of prejudice just because they have less amount of data available for this AI, so the result would be less favorable for them. If you think about for example, even the Google Translator will translate when you're translating something from neutral gender language into something like English, which has like pronouns for male and female. It has its own biases about how to translate. For example, from Turkish, if you translate like someone is a nurse and someone is a doctor to English, it will highly likely will be she is a nurse and he is a doctor. And that's just because it has more data and more instances available in the data set. So there's a higher chance that prediction will be accurate. And that's a kind of bias that we will be seeing when we are dealing with people that are kind of marginalized and less presented in the society. They will have less favorable data available. And that's another thing we should be conscious of.
So it sounds like it becomes an issue of just, on some level, maybe data cleaning in the sense that we want to remove things that could inadvertently cause bias, but then also selecting the right features to include in the model. Is that kind of a right assessment there?
Yes. Yeah, that's a one way. That's definitely a good way to start looking at it. And generating more data, make sure that it's more balanced. But then you will not get only one feature. Let's say you need to balance your data for 100 different features, and that's going to be the difficulty, right? It's not only the gender that you need to balance it for. It's maybe socioeconomical background. It can be cultural background. It can be like how many of these features you want to think about and make sure that your data set includes kind of the similar instances for each one of these group of people. And that's a kind of active complexity for us to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got some wonderful questions rolling in from people in the chat. If you guys have questions, make sure you drop them right there in the chat. We're going to get to them. The first one here we got is from Jesselyn, and Jesselyn is saying, in your slide, it's activating some curiosity. What would be an example of creating a Black Mirror episode method? Is that to try to create the most bleak dystopian alternative of the AI
Yes.
outcome possible?
Yeah, exactly. Because when we're mitigating the risk, we need to think about the extreme cases. Um, and we need to make sure that we can handle those extreme cases. Because the ethical frameworks is not much about the accuracy and these the normal things that we're thinking about is, for example, um, if your score is 2.5 and it will give you 2.7, that is not the ethical issue that we're too much concerned about. That's why, like, having kind of that mindset of Black Mirror episode will give you understanding that what can go wrong, right? As I just talked about it, like you literally can put in sticker, like a very small sticker on traffic signs, and it will fool the algorithm. I mean, don't use it, guys. I'm not giving you any instructions for anyone to try this at home. It's not very safe. But what I'm saying here that this can happen, and somebody maliciously might be able to do it, or even let's say it's not maliciously. It's just because of some corrosion or some stuff that might happen to that sign. It might turn into something that is not easily understandable by AI, and that's this extreme case. And you can see that that sign might be identified as like you're allowed to go fast. And imagine if that's in the downtown, a lot of people just walking, and the stop signs becomes like 100 kilometers per hour, and then you're going to have a problem. And this is kind of the mindset that we need to have to understand the problems that might happen if things go wrong.
So another question here from Salim. Salim wants to know, can you give more examples of good biased? And then a follow-up question from Chris, which I think flows nicely here, is what's the biggest risk of training AI using biased data?
So first of all, a good biased. So biased means like you just separate one thing into different groups based on some certain characteristics, and that's totally fine if you, for example, are recruiting and your algorithm is biased towards, let's say, the years of experience, right? So you're going to recruit a chief data scientist for, let's say, Microsoft, and the algorithm picks the one who has more experience, and that's great. That's what you want. But then you don't want it to, do it based on the gender, age, or the other protected characteristics. And as I mentioned, like in a health environment, in medical environment, you might be biased against the gender just because the certain medical decisions only applies for certain genders, like probably that's still the case, but being pregnant is only for female as a gender. And so you do want to have it when your system is going to predict that, right? Because of inaccuracies, you want to make sure that it doesn't generate this kind of results for the males. And sorry, what was the last question? The other one?
Yeah, the question was just the biggest risk of training AI using biased data.
Yeah, so things can go very wrong. Like, it just depends on the application, right? As I said, like, it just depends where the algorithm is being used. If it is being used in Netflix, it can go wrong, and it can give you a bad recommendation, which is it's not a big deal, right? But then if it is being used to admit you to college, then certain people with certain characteristics will be rejected because of that, and you don't want that, because then it will make some sort of injustice and unfairness among people. So that's the bias that the implication is just different based on where we are using it. If you're using some sort of facial recognition systems to make some decisions, and then that will be biased against certain racial or cultural background, then that will be harmful. And then finally, if AI is being used in military cases and in arm race to kind of have drones identifying people and being used to harm people directly, then that's an extreme case that can be and will be more dangerous than nuclear weapons in some cases. It's just because of the complexity of the system and the way that it can impact people's lives.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you think about it this way: there's AI systems in which we as end consumers are just presented with more options, and options can be presented to us, and we could either like them, dislike them, no harm, no foul. But then it could be implemented in systems where it is deciding whether or not somebody is getting an opportunity, right? And in those instances where we're unfairly taking away opportunities from people, that's where we need to really, really think about what it is that we're doing. I just want to check with the team if we have enough time for one more question. Just go ahead and let me know. Yeah, so here's a question about causation, which I think is pretty interesting. What areas do you think causation plays a significant role? Is causation important for regression problems like predicting housing prices? Can you give more examples of causation?
Yeah, so causation is important when you want to trace back the results in some sensitive cases, and you want to understand why some algorithm predicts in such a certain way. It can be, for example, in finance, where you're a financial advisor and you want to advise some person to, invest their life assets, like what they had as an asset accumulated through their lifetime into certain areas, and you want to make sure that you can trace it back to some logics, because then if things go wrong, it has huge implications on somebody's life, right? So you want to make sure that you understand a little bit about what happens and why this particular decision has been made. And similarly, for maybe legal cases, if you're using AI to generate some sort of maybe sentencing a person, that you want to make sure a little bit more about how and why this particular algorithm comes from certain decision making. The causation, I guess, it's more important as a result gets more impactful and more harm can be done through this algorithm, or the team, the data science or the AI team itself might want to trace back and test the systems to make sure that they're robust. So they want to know what are the certain features that are being very, very, I guess, influential, and want to trace it back to some causes that then they can come up with actions if they want to understand what's not right in their industrial kind of process. Then this will help a lot to have actionable insights for the managers to change some of the processes.
That's very, very, really insightful response there. I can't wait to go back and listen to that. There's a lot to digest there. Shout out to Kanchan or Gunshan for asking that question. I'm not sure if I pronounced your name right. One more question, because I find this one to be really, really fascinating, and it's about traceability coming from an anonymous person in our audience. How do we ensure that AI algorithms are traceable? FANG has many black box AI tools. How are we to ensure freedom of development, but also government regulation for ethical and privacy considerations?
That's a very important topic, because as we talked about the being black box and all those stuff, it just makes it complex for us to understand what can go wrong and what are the reasons. And then here, definitely, you cannot blame the industry for thinking too much about the profit, because that's the reason these companies exist. Like at the end of the day, Facebook, Microsoft, they exist. The Google, they exist because of all these data they collect and leverage to generate more income, and that's their I guess goal for their algorithms to generate more, I guess, revenue, right? So that we cannot rely too much on these for-profit companies. It should be their legal I guess it should be in their legal accountability to make sure that they're following certain rules. But then we need to have these independent, governmental, non-for-profit, I guess more of public companies to regulate and observe how AI is being generated, used, leveraged to impact any customer. And it should be kind of like how they regulate, for example, medicine, right? So if you think about it, there's lots of processes. Like before a vaccine comes out, it needs to go through a rigorous process and like understanding a lot of this test's results. And then also they have a screening process after the medicine is being used, right? It's not just a one-off kind of testing before they release these in the market. Sometimes they actually would stop some products to to be sold, and just because they understand something is not right about it. And that's the similar for AI. So I guess in the next couple of years, there will be a lot of tension between these organizations that are for profit and the ones that will be regulatory, because they have been leveraging the power of data for many, many years. And they were like super confident that this is going to be their competitive advantage for the future. And out of sudden that we're going to have these ethical frameworks that might, limit them in the way that they're leveraging this data into their own, benefit. And they need to be more transparent about it, and they need to have a lot of regulations and testing around this, which will cost more, which will lower their, their profit margin. So that's the reality of the challenges. The other is the government itself, and that's a big deal as well, because the traceability, making sure that these algorithms are right. It's probably easier when we're dealing with for-profit organizations that can be regulated by governments. But then when the governments that are actually entering this, for example, arm race between like the superpowers, then that's going to be the most complex things that we are going to deal with. It's just because it will be tied into their national security, and anything that is remotely related to national security will bypass many laws, even ethical laws, ethical frameworks. And I'm telling you, that's the reality. Like, we are all living in a very, very advanced world, and we're all, I guess, trying to follow the principles. But when it comes with the life and death of a person, country, things get more complex than we can think about. And a lot of times these arm race can start by just assuming that the others are doing it. It's just assumption that if your country doesn't do it, doesn't follow the same kind of way of weaponizing AI, it will, you will be left out, and you will not be able to protect your own citizen, and having some sort of guarantee for the protection and sovereignty of your country. And then it's just a matter of, you know, how this will play out, and it will be probably very similar to what we are seeing with the nuclear right now. There will be people, you know, trying to have more of it and accumulate, and then trying to have regulation around it for others not to go for it. And that's going to be, I guess, a very complex one, because AI is not actually like tangible thing that you can trace and follow, like the way that you can do with weapons. Like it is not as easy to understand. You can manipulate people's mind in different countries using data and AI, and just the traceability and understanding of that particular project, it is very, very complex. And that's going to be the major, I guess, one of the major problems of the humanity and democracy in the next, I guess, 10 years or decades to come, that you will understand how these governments will leverage people's data to try to understand and manipulate the way that they are thinking, like voting or other certain important democratic decision making.
Steve, thank you so much for that. You definitely have left us with a lot to think about and a lot to consider. My friend, it's always good connecting with you. You guys, make sure you tune into the Artists of Data Science podcast. Later this summer, I've got an episode releasing with Steve where we talk a lot, about stuff like this as well. And also, guys, don't forget, take that screenshot right now of me and Steve here, tag Steve, tag myself, use the hashtag DSGoVirtual hashtag, and you're going to win some really cool prizes. I've taken a sneak peek at what they got going on back there. It's some interesting stuff. Steve, my friend, thank you very much for spending part of your early morning here with us. I appreciate having you here.
Thank you very much, Harpreet. It was a pleasure.